Welcome to another Rock My Age podcast, Living Life to the Full. I am delighted today to be joined by Cleona Lira. Cleona is a financial advisor specialising in sustainable investing, which is a great topic to be talking about today. And we are going to talk about particularly sustainable investing with regards women. So welcome, Cleona.
Thank you.
So you and I talked a little bit before this podcast about some of the ways you go about planning in sustainable investing for women, and also perhaps why women are more maybe interested in sustainable investment, but certainly how it might affect them positively. And I know that your sort of premise is about empowering women. I love this idea of financial feminism. And you talk about this idea of freedom and clarity with money and life in general. And we did a podcast a little while ago, I think someone you know, Tim Malnick, who talked about giving confidence, helping women to have more confidence with money and feeling that they are worth being wealthy. And I know one of the things you talked to me about was fascinating, was that women don't always necessarily feel they have the right to be wealthy. Would that be fair? A good summation of what you said to me?
I guess each individual woman has her unique problems based on her conditioning, but then there's also the systemic blueprint that we receive in general terms as women. Mm-hmm. And some of those messages are about being small and, we've only been visible in the financial world, even in the UK, which is a fairly progressive economy. Sometime in the 70s and the 80s, we were officially allowed to take mortgages, So we've been invisible, and with money being quite a significant way to get needs met in the world that we live in, it's one way to have power. And I think more and more women are waking up to wanting to have more equality with money, We're talking more about financial abuse and just ways in which we are suppressed around money. The women clients that I tend to see, and my universe is quite small and quite biased. I've not done any significant studies, but I have read books like this one by Annabelle Williams called Why Women Are Poorer Than Men. And there's lots of studies.
You mentioned that book. I've scared that. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and she's very eloquent, articulate, and it's based in the UK. But when women come to me, they tend to be more sure that they want to invest sustainably when I ask, that I have almost an equal number of men and women clients that are interested in sustainable investing, with a slight bias towards more women wanting it. And I think there's something about how we feel more connected. The principles of interdependence and collaboration are conditioned into us, or I don't know, part of us as our DNA. I don't know, because it's hard to separate what's conditioned and what's natural.
Absolutely. And you talked about women, this idea of we tend to be the carers and the nurturers and almost the stewards of the earth, which I thought was lovely. And I can see that link back through to, why women are, and I think will become, way more interested in sustainable investing.
Yes, and certainly there are more women voices and authors in the space, and also about climate change, which is very exciting and interesting. And yes, there is that pragmatic bit about, the language of finance being quite alienating and quite difficult. And I think it is for men and women. It's not easy to understand and grasp. But I think women have some hurdles to overcome in terms of investing, feeling less confident, or scared to make mistakes. And I think it's a lot to do with how we're socialized, and
that piece around making mistakes, I think that's a really interesting point. Tim and I talked about that. This idea that, I was using myself as an example. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I was worried about making mistakes generally in life. But I think with money particularly, it's a really hard thing, because you think, if I make the wrong mistake, if I invest in the wrong pension, or I invest in the wrong investments, it's sort of almost sort of irreparable, I suppose. And so you feel much more concerned about that. How do you allay people's fears on that? Because investments can go up and down. You can't promise anything yourself.
Yeah. It's a conversation and understanding what the angle is exactly about the mistakes, and it's a legitimate fear. Usually if you're investing in a pension, it has such significance for your future that sometimes we place disproportionate emphasis on small mistakes, to the extent that sometimes women would rather be paralyzed and not do anything, and really then I frame it as the biggest mistake is really not investing, because you're not getting to participate at all if you don't even, if you're not on the playground, so to speak. And and just lightening and playfully allowing, with Tim Malnick's work, what's wrong with making mistakes? Mistakes are part of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And noticing, like shadow work, basically, and just having that approach,
What's the process, Cleona? So you talked to me a little bit about the importance, particularly with sustainable investing, of understanding people's values, possibly even their life purpose, but certainly their values, so that you can align the portfolio with that. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process that someone like myself might go through with you?
Yeah, I mean, typically you'd read up on the advisor's website. You'd decide that you wanted financial advice, which is not necessary. You can, there are plenty of websites where you can go and figure out how to do it yourself with some support. And a little 15-minute phone call is my approach. And then we have an hour's initial consultation, which is a no cost, no obligation sort of meeting where, we can talk a little bit more about the process. But more than the process, I take it back to Tim Malnick's work, which is, what is this money really about? And what vision, purpose, values do you have for your life? And let money drive that, because quite often we get lost in the, oh, what fund should I pick? And, I want this much return and da. And actually, if you get those principles right, then the financial plan falls into place much easier. Otherwise, there's a lot of resistance, along the way. When I understand my vision of, I want to be free because I want to devote my life to volunteer work after 5 years, and I cannot stand doing 9-to-5 work, and this is what my perfect life looks like, then there's more motivation. Otherwise it becomes like, I got to save £300 a month for a pension. There's no life in it.
And how do you, if you're having those conversations with the women, how do you then think about which funds to invest particularly? So are there themes, I suppose I'm thinking? So for example, myself, I'm quite interested in fashion style. So might I say to you, look, I'm quite interested in investing in those firms that are, really sort of ethical all the way through their value chain, in a sustainable fashion. I mean, how are you, is there a sort of thread for you when you speak to someone about therefore where you would suggest they invest?
Yeah, we are regulated financial advisors, so we have a specific process for a fact find and a specific questionnaire to elicit those values. What's more important? Is it human rights violations, the environment? Those usually are high up there on the list for most of my clients. And then the less seemingly important ones, but could be quite important to certain people, such as GMO or fashion, or how labor is treated, and sweatshop conditions, those kind of things. So it's where is that emotional, this is not okay for me, where does that fit in? And it's very important for me to understand.
And do you have to do some research into those firms yourself, or is that a sort of a higher level investment firm that would then tell you, what that firm's strategy is, so that you can be sure that it aligns with the individual's needs, wants, desires?
Yeah, there are research methodologies where the funds will say, we agree to these definitions, and I can share those definitions with the client, and I make sure that the client understands that it's these definitions, not your definition, because we have very personal views on what is ethical and what is not. And it's not about necessarily, what's moral to you. It's just what is the agreed definition that the fund manager says, yeah, this is environmental damage. X percentage of companies not investing in fossil fuels, for example, it's quite specific. Mm-hmm. So yes,
you would come up more with the list of companies for the portfolio than the client would, but the client could add into that list. Presumably they might have read about a company, or they might have a view on a company that they would like to add into the portfolio. And does that work? Is that the process?
It doesn't work.
Okay, tell me.
I have a list of funds, not companies, not individual stocks. So if the client has a particular stock in mind and they feel competent and confident about it, then I encourage them to have it in their own sort of private trading account. But as financial advisors, we don't give advice on single companies. We're not authorized and regulated to do that, but we can give advice on funds. And there's not much control on the companies within the funds, because the fund manager can make changes, And so it's just understanding the parameters of what's possible. There is definitely some control and some say in how your money is invested, but it's not perfection yet.
Got you. Okay.
And there's also shades, like you can have your traditional ethical investor, which is about, not investing. It used to be like no tobacco, and now it's like no human rights violations or no fossil fuels. And that's more like a negation strategy away from. And then you also have something called impact investing, which is where you can, look at measurable sort of outputs, So, for example, X tons of carbon, not launched into the environment, things like that. So there's quite a lot of definitions in the world of sustainable investing, and it's quite mind-boggling even for financial advisors,
And I like that idea of, in a sense, sort of away from versus sort of, we often talk, so I do quite a lot of work in sort of ethical branding, and we talk a lot about, this idea of planet positive. So how can you invest in something that is actually, helping the planet rather than just, obviously moving away from something is also helping the planet, but it's almost like, are there particular funds that are planet positive? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there are certainly more funds that are more environmentally focused than others. But impact investing, which is the pro methodology, it could be argued by default weeds out the negative, because they're really interested in picking global businesses that are creating solutions for the world that we want to live in. And they are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So no hunger, things like that, which are really quite important. And significant investment needs to be attracted in those sectors to catch up with the UN SDGs. And we have ambitious targets. And so some clients say a bit of both, some clients are very impact focused. So it just depends on where on the spectrum you see yourselves.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so how does this work in terms, so I have a portfolio with you, and then, how does someone kind of know how it's working, tracking? Do you have regular catch-ups with people? Do you adjust the portfolio? How does that work?
Yeah, you have a login, and so you have access to seeing the investments. So you can see percentages, you can ask questions about what you don't understand. Typically, I will see my client once a year for a formal annual review, but during the year, we will have ongoing contact, What happens after a few years is you get to know your clients really well, and you almost become like friends with some of them. And so it's just whenever there is a need, they feel free to contact me. And if something needs rebalancing, or there's a massive change, or their risk has changed, their circumstances have changed, or there's a problem with one of the funds, and it gets flagged up, and we have an open conversation about it.
Do you generally find people, I won't say you can't match expectations because it's an investment, but is there a sense of managing people's expectations, to sort of help alleviate any fears they have? You said earlier about that idea of not making mistakes, being perfect, and I suppose, as you said, it's a new era for a lot of women, this idea of creating power through money in some ways. How do you manage that expectations and fear, I suppose?
I encourage, it depends how interested they are in learning, because some people are just not interested. They're like, you just manage it and I trust you. But if the client is interested in learning, that's my preferred method, because then they are growing and feeling empowered. And, there's also a power imbalance where the financial advisor usually has a lot of power in the knowledge aspect of investing. And that's a good way to share power, is to say, would you like to learn, and how would you like to learn? So podcasts, books, I have a monthly newsletter in which I share tons of resources. But I think understanding the history of equity markets and seeing that equity, investing in shares, investing in companies over long periods of time has always rewarded investors quite well, so that alleviates some of the fears, just seeing sort of facts in black and white. Yeah. And then in terms of managing expectations, we've had a really good bull market run. The last 10 years have been fairly positive and upbeat. So it's just, reminding clients that this could go wrong, anything can happen. Just remember, we're in it for the long haul. I'll be there to talk you off the ledge, but just it's not always going to be your portfolio is up 10, 15%. That this is, for the last 12 months. This is quite nice, but yeah, just managing expectations.
And tell me, Cleona, what do women generally, what do they mentioned earlier about, someone, I don't know, might be changing career, or you said, looking to do volunteer work. Are there particular themes that women come to you with that they're looking for money to support them on the journey? And I'm interested actually on an age bracket as well. I mean, what age do people generally come to you to seek support in building a portfolio? So 2 questions there, sorry.
Yeah, it tends to be 40 plus, more or less. Mm-hmm. But I have seen younger clients, and I love seeing younger clients. I just like the diversity so that, you have different kinds of clients and you can react differently as a professional. And then your second part of your question?
Yeah. So I was thinking that if there's particular themes that women come to you with. So, I mean, it might be for me, I've always been interested in running a retreat. How do I fund that through investment, or how do I find a way to build? A lot of, I think, women want an income as they get older. It doesn't have to be a huge income because they want to simplify their lives, but they need an income. And, those are the sort of things I'm thinking of. But there may be other themes that women come to you with.
Yeah, a lot of women come to me with looking at their pensions and their retirement planning. And so financial freedom features in the list of priorities quite high. And then it's also sometimes just simply, I have some disposable income, I don't know what to do with it. And then the conversation evolves into what could your goals be? Because a lot of times clients will come to you with unarticulated goals, So they've got money, they've got a loose plan, but it's not clear. So it's my job to sort of make it more structured if that's what they want, it helps.
I can see that alignment. So I'm a next executive coach, and that's very much, the whole point of coaching is you start with the goals, so are you on track, and you can keep coming back to those, can't you? So they're really important.
Yes, and more as I mature as a financial advisor, I'm focusing on my craft of asking questions and listening, and my practice of nonviolent communication really helps me to listen to the deeper needs that are going on. And of course, things like Tim Malnick's shadow work, which is always in the background, because it's never just about that external relationship to money and the practical, pragmatic things, where to invest, how much to invest, what are we, what is goal, but it's also this inner stuff about, I don't actually like money, so I can't engage with it. I don't actually want to be rich. I don't actually want to be wealthy, or I feel worthless or dirty around money. Those kind of things come up as well,
It's interesting you practice nonviolent communication. That's fascinating. It's a great practice, isn't it, to support coaching? Really, really good.
Yeah, and a great practice to listen. I thought I was very empathic and a very good listener. And then after learning NVC, I just realized how badly we are trained to listen and how quickly we judge. And, even now, I'm still programmed to jump to solution when someone asks me a question, instead of asking more questions to find out exactly what, is really needed and to get to the heart of the matter. So this,
yes,
I hate it when people do it to me, and then I also have this habit.
Yeah, we're very good. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're very good at jumping into the how, aren't we? So solution and the how are we going to do something, rather than spending some time in the why.
Yes. And start with why, Simon Sinek. That's, it's so important.
Yeah.
But it's easy to just get in the flow of the process and, let's get this money sorted. And usually clients come to you with the money and they're like, deal with it, and so that's how the ball starts, and then you can take it further if that's what the client wants. And some clients don't want to engage in this inner work, so I'm very respectful, because I'm not a coach, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm a professional, and I'm here to deal with, what. So I'm very careful in how I offer them additional support, and, take it slowly.
Got it.
And maybe encourage them to go to Tim's workshops and things like that, because I think money work is quite provocative, quite emotional, and not everyone wants to look at money, and that's okay.
No, it's fascinating, and it's so good as listening to Tim a couple of weeks ago, this idea just to understand, the motivations and the triggers, and as you said, that sort of shadow work, and the kind of the past histories of storylines, beliefs, patterns that we've had, and that can affect so much, can't it? How we not just see money, but how we use money. And I'm fascinated in that piece you said about, well, people might not even believe that they should be wealthy, or they could be wealthy, which I think is fascinating, isn't it? So when people have invested with you and are investing with you, sort of ongoing, what are some of the things that do you get a sense of some things they're feeling from then not necessarily taking control, as you said, because some people are giving it to you, but this idea that even if they've given you the money and said, you do the strategy, they've still taken a step forward. What's your sense of how they're feeling, and not necessarily what they've achieved in their life, because that will be confidential, but some of the qualities that have come out for them?
Specifically with women, it's usually some anxiety about the future, scared of not having enough, not having a big enough pot. Sometimes with childless women, it's about, I don't have family necessarily and children who I can count on, so I have to be more independent. So and it can be an additional layer of fear, although I don't know if it's necessarily true that women with children, can rely on their children to look after them. Then there's a lot of shame also around having money. There's more conversations around privilege and money, and so some shame around, the privilege and having more money than others. There's also like a discomfort. I suppose if you're the wealthiest member in your family and you're quite successful and the others haven't quite caught up, then there's also that discomfort even within your own family or your own tribe about having more. So yeah, shame, anxiety, just general discomfort. And then I notice sometimes with some clients, after the first meeting, when they've decided that they want to do it, they're ready to invest and they're going to invest, there's an excitement, and there's almost like going from a childlike playfulness to more of I feel so much more mature now, I feel grown up now. One of my favorite anecdotes is of a client who was 60 when she met me, and she set up her first pension, and as she walked out of the door, she said to me, I feel so grown up now.
That's great. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you mentioned retirement earlier. And in some ways, Debbie and I talk a lot about this in What Mage, that we don't necessarily retire in the old way we used to. And in some ways, we have a second act or, a second chapter of our lives now that we do need investments or money to play a role in to help support that. I'm 62 coming up. I believe, I hope to have another at least 25 years of health that I can, do whatever it is that I want to do. And of course, money plays a role in that. I still have to, find that within as well, energetically and directionally and sense of purpose. But money can play a very important role in that. And do you find that with people that they are, particularly women, looking for a second chapter?
Yeah. I tend to work with younger clients. So I catch them between their 40s and their 60s.
Got you. Yeah.
So I haven't got lots to say on that, but
no. Okay.
I'm always open to the possibility of listening to my client to see what they really want to do, not for money, but in life, and then encouraging them to go towards life, which might not be the money path, as you know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so nice that you parallel track that, that you've got this life money piece.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll meet a client who has a stable job and she's got like a final salary pension, and every year she might get a redundancy offer and she'll consider it. What she really wants to do is something else, but there's so much fear, and it's this encouraging them and being their cheerleader and advocating for what they really want, while also being quite pragmatic and understanding that some people are just not ready, and it's their time, not mine, because I tend to be more like, oh, this is something I want to do, I'm just going to do it, there's no hesitation. And some people are more held back, and for me it's just understanding that their life is their business, and I can encourage and advocate, and sometimes you feel really torn because you can see that the person can make the jump, but it's when they are ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So in reality, if someone, we'll put your details obviously on the podcast. And I guess what you said is first step, it's to have an initial conversation, and then to step one step further if people are interested into a consultation. I guess to ideally come with some idea of what your goals are in life, but then you obviously through your questioning help them get there by the sounds of it, which is great. Is there anything that you'd leave sort of a last thought for women who might be thinking a little bit like me, well, I haven't actually, outside of my pension, don't do too much investing. I have sustainable, part of my pension is in the sustainable space, but outside of that, what would you say to women that might be thinking, oh, it's interesting, but not sure?
I would say it's really, really important for women to get involved in investing. It's one way to access your power, your financial power. And women are disproportionately affected by conflicts, pandemics, climate change, and we make good investors. We are good investors. There are studies that show that we are better than men at investing. And
why is that, Cleona? Why is that? Sorry to interrupt, but why is that? Why are we better investors?
Because we are less brash and less confident when we make decisions. And so we tend to not interfere so much with our portfolio. We tend to just let it go and let it ride. Trust. And that's the best thing that you can do, is don't mess and play, and
Interesting.
So women log in less to check their accounts, and then if you check your account and you've lost money, the tendency is to react and to do something. And women tend to be more patient or more,
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because actually what you're saying is it's I love that idea, because actually it's for women, it's to help women have power. And yet when they invest, what they're really doing is they're holding that idea of power, and they're not interfering with that. So they're not trying to over control, which is fascinating, because there's two aspects there of power, aren't there?
Yeah. And we also live longer. We are out of the workforce because we're looking after children or aging parents and things like that. So there are good reasons why we should invest. Really, investing in equity is the best way to beat inflation. And yes, the first step is to meet with a financial advisor and go with an initial consultation. But for whatever reason, if you don't need a financial advisor, there's so many resources on the internet. Within 2 weeks, you could get financial literate if you wanted to. And I think becoming more learned about investing is really important for women, so that would be the first step. Just read, just try to get excited about money.
Brilliant. Cleona, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of that insights with us and wisdom on money. And I'm fascinated by it, and I'm hoping to attend Tim's workshop first to go through that process. So a million thank yous.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. And if you'd like to listen to more conversations with inspiring women, do look at our website, rockmyage.com, or register to have them delivered direct to your inbox. Until next time.